Good evening. This is Atheist History Week, and I'm John Rafferty, President of the Secular Humanist Society of New York, and a proud and active member of New York City Atheists, which produces this show. Each week at this time, we look at the week's anniversaries in the history of atheism and free thought in general, of agnosticism over secularism, humanism, skepticism, rationalism, whatever you have on that side of the intellectual scale. We discuss notable people, we discuss the famous and the not so famous and some of the infamous, who were born or died or achieved something significant in regards to free thought during this calendar week. And we look at significant events that took place this week in history. Court cases, publishing events, religious riots, burnings at the stakes, fatwas, and other faith-based fun and games. We have an interesting group of people, sort of mixed bag this week. But let's start with probably the most famous of the people that we're going to discuss, George Orwell. Who was born June 25th. And as I should have said a moment ago, we're dealing with the last week in June. And it is the last week in June, right? George Orwell was born on June 25th in 1903. But he was born Eric Arthur Blair. George Orwell was his pen name, but which he's so well known. He was born in India. He was educated in England at Eton, but then joined the Indian Imperial Police in Burma. And that was a big thing for the rest of his life because in dealing with police matters, he got a first-hand look at the way people are treated, the way he saw the underside of life, and he saw how in some cases the guardians of law and order were just as reprehensible who they were supposedly guarding. He left and he bummed around Europe for experience, and he wrote an autobiographical account of that bumming around, especially of working in the kitchens of restaurants in Paris, and he called it Down and Out in Paris and London, and it was pretty well received. He wrote a novel, A Clergyman's Daughter, which had a very unflattering look at the repression of religion in society, and that's where he came out as a free thinker or an atheist. He had a couple of other big successes, Keep the Aspidastra Flying and Coming Up for Air. He joined the Loyalist side during the Spanish Civil War of the late 30s and wrote a book called Homage to Catalonia, which my generation read. If you didn't read it, you weren't on the left. After he was wounded in the fighting during the Civil War, he wrote Homage to Catalonia. Orwell was a free thinker and an anarchist, a free thinker socially and anarchist politically. Anarchy at the time in the 30s was, nobody really realized how ridiculous a position it is, and Blair, that is Orwell, and his friends, many of his anarchist friends, they changed their minds about their good friends on the left, the communists, when the Stalinists came in to Spain during that war and started wiping out people on the left just as easily as they wiped out people on the right. And so Orwell, Blair became a socialist, really. And then looking back on the communism, specifically the Stalinism of the 30s, he wrote his masterpiece in 1945, Animal Farm. That one that had the wonderful line, the animals who would take over the farm from the farmer and now run the farm as a socialist paradise but then gradually the pigs take over. And their justification is that all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. That's a pretty good definition of Stalinism. And there's a character in Animal Farm called Moses, a bird who symbolized the clergy in society. What was he? A spy and a stoolie. So, who promised all the animals that when they died, they would go up Sugar Candy Mountain. Orwell followed that up in 1949 with another masterpiece, 1984. Which put several words and phrases into common ordinary usage in the English language, Big Brother being the most famous of them, but others like Newspeak. It was a terrifying image of totalitarianism, and is a basic text now in every college, every liberal arts college in America. Both of them, as a matter of fact. Animal Farm in 1984. George Orwell became one of the most influential writers of the 20th century in not only English language, but any language in the world. His atheism or free thought was more implicit than explicit. After A Clergyman's Daughter and the Moses character in Animal Farm, he didn't, not that I know of, he didn't write anything specifically, but when he was writing about Gandhi in a book, he said, "One must choose between God and man, and all radicals and progressives, from the mildest liberal to the most extreme anarchist, have in effect chosen man." To think back to Alexander Pope, the proper study of mankind is man, not God, and George Orwell would agree 100%. George Orwell, born June 25th in 1903. Almost 60 years later, in 1961, on June 25, was born a funny man whom we all know, Ricky Gervais, the creator of The Office and several other very funny shows, including one that I like very much, which ran on HBO here in America. And of course, The Office has had its American spin-off, which is also a pretty good show. But Gervais was interviewed by Best Life magazine a couple of years ago, and he talked about his own childhood. "I was a good boy," he said. "I went to church and believed in God. One day I was sitting at the kitchen table, happily drawing my hero, Jesus, when my big brother Bob asked, 'Why do you believe in God?' Just a simple question, but my mom panicked. 'Bob,' she said in a tone that I knew meant, 'Shut up.' Why was that a bad thing to ask? If there was a God and my faith was strong, it didn't matter what people said. Oh, hang on, there is no God. He knows it, and she knows it deep down. It was as simple as that. I started thinking about it and asking more questions, and within an hour, I was an atheist." Ricky Gervais. That's faster than my conversion, I gotta say, or anybody else I know. Long may Ricky Gervais wave. He is now one of the most successful both writers, actors, and producers in television and now in film. He's currently working on a Day in the Life of an Idiot for BBC Two, and a comedy film called This Side of Truth, and hope we see them both very soon here in America. Going further back in American history, in 1842, as a matter of fact, on June 24th, The author of The Devil's Dictionary was born. Ambrose Bierce was born in Ohio. And as a teenager, he went to work in newspapers. He enlisted in the Civil War at the age of 19, and he then settled down. He then entered a life of writing, and he was a journalist and a journalist. Let's just call him a journalist. He worked for several San Francisco newspapers, writing 167 weekly satiric town crier columns that he later published in book form called The Fiend's Delight. He traveled in Europe. He continued to write mostly columns, amusing, funny columns. As the years went on, he became more and more of an agnostic, a free thinker, mostly an anti-church writer. Camels and Christians, he said, alike receive their burdens kneeling, and treat things divine with marked respect. Don't have anything to do with them. He wrote a ghost story, by the way, that is probably you've run across in an anthology of short stories in high school. An occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, one of the best ghost stories ever written, and still very much in print. He put together many of his columns, and his short little epigrams have been part of the American vocabulary for over 100 years now. He put them all together in a book he called The Cynic's Word, and then later renamed The Devil's Dictionary. He died rather interestingly, let's put it that way. Nobody knows exactly where he died or when. In 1913, at the age of 70, he told friends that during a visit to Texas, that he was going south. And there is the last that's heard of him. There are a lot of legends, including one that several variations of one, that he went to Mexico and fought beside Pancho Villa and died in battle. Another variation of that is he fought with Pancho Villa, who killed him in an argument. And other that said he never went to Mexico at all. Anyway, he believed that he died in 1914. And a novel called The Old Gringo by Carlos Fuentes was about Bierce's last days, was made into a movie with Gregory Peck and Jane Fonda in 1989. Not a bad movie either. Treat yourself to some of, or I'll treat you to some of Ambrose Bierce's definitions in The Devil's Dictionary. Christian, noun, one who believes that the New Testament is a divinely inspired book admirably suited to the spiritual needs of his neighbor. One who follows the teachings of Christ insofar as they are not inconsistent with a life of sin. On the other hand, turn it around. Infidel, a noun. In New York, one who does not believe in the Christian religion. In Constantinople, one who does. How about an evangelist? Noun. A bearer of good tidings, particularly in a religious sense, such as those that assure us of our own salvation and the damnation of our neighbors. The verb to pray, and this is one of my favorites, to ask that the laws of the universe be annulled in behalf of a single petitioner, confessedly unworthy. And a saint, she said, is a dead sinner, revised and edited. Ambrose Bierce, June 24th, 1842, and died who knows when, where, or how. A lot more about Emma Goldman, who was born on June 27th in 1869 in Russia. Of my youth in Russia, I have rebelled against orthodoxy in every form, she wrote in 1934. Her father told her that a Jewish daughter needed only to prepare herself for marriage. And so the 17-year-old Emma emigrated with her sister to New York, taking factory work. When she said that she rebelled against orthodoxy, she really did. Because not only did she rebel against her family, not only did she rebel against her religion, not only did she rebel against the social conditions of the time, being as far left as you can go in believing in anarchy and working and proselytizing and being accused of terrorism in the name of anarchy. But then when she got all the way to the left and she wound up in the Soviet Union, she rebelled against that orthodoxy too and came back the other way. Okay. Horrendous 1887 Haymarket bombing and the execution then of innocent anarchists who were accused. Nobody knew who had bombed the Haymarket and killed a lot of innocent people. So some anarchists were dragged into court and themselves tried on flimsy evidence or no evidence at all and executed. That radicalized Emma Goldman completely, and she threw herself into what she called the ecstatic song of political oratory. Emma Goldman was one of the best orators of her time. She could really whip up a crowd. She and Sasha Berkman dedicated themselves to a supreme act for which Berkman spent 14 years in prison. What did they do? They took a shot, or he took a shot, at Henry Clay Frick, the chair of the Carnegie Steel Corporation. Emma would later backtrack and say she was wrong, that the ends did not justify the means. But she was arrested a bunch of times, and when an anarchist madman in 1901 assassinated President William McKinley, Emma decided it was pretty much a good idea to go underground, which she did for several years until the anti-red, anti-anarchist hysteria in the United States calmed down. When it had, she launched Mother Earth magazine in 1906, and she continued to agitate and work till 1916, when she went to prison for advocating birth control, among other things, saying that women need not always keep their mouths shut and their wombs open. In 1917, she was arrested, convicted, and served 2 years in prison for setting up no conscription leagues, in other words, defying the draft. And a warden at the prison said the other women in the prison worshipped Emma like an idol because she nursed and fought for women's prisoners. At the age of 50 in 1919, she and 247 other Reds were deported to the Soviet Union through the efforts of a young man named J. Edgar Hoover. She famously said, who was it who said, I have seen the future and it works, about the Soviet Union at that time. And Emma Goldman turned it around and said, I've seen the future and it doesn't work. And she, as true to her beliefs and her rebellion against orthodoxy as she always had been in her life, she really put her life in danger, because she was right there in the Soviet Union. She said, it doesn't work, it's a dictatorship, it stinks, and I don't like it, and she got out. But she did get out. She wrote her autobiography in 1931, and 2 essays that recommend her to us very particularly: The Failure of Christianity in 1913 and The Philosophy of Atheism in 1916. "I do not believe in God because I believe in man," she wrote. "Whatever his mistakes, man has for thousands of years been working to undo the botched job your God has made. There are some potentates I would kill by any and all means at my disposal. They are ignorance, superstition, and bigotry, the most cynical and tyrannical rulers on earth." That's from an 1898 speech to a Detroit congregation. Emma Goldman, who was born June 27th in 1869. And more power to Emma, one of my favorite people. By the way, there was that T-shirt that was very popular in the 1970s, and it said, "If I can't dance, I don't want to be in your revolution." She never said it. She did describe a time when she was a young woman and she was having a terrific time at a dance, and one of her not companions but fellow travelers, anarchists, said to her that she was having much too good a time. This was not something that serious people did, dance and cavort and have a good time. And she said, if I remember correctly, she said, I tore into the impertinent boy and told him that anything as glorious as our cause should be celebrated with joy. And so a guy with a silkscreen press in the 1970s, whose name I can't remember, took that whole incident, shortened it, made it into the aphorism, "If I can't dance, I don't want to be in your revolution," printed it on a T-shirt and sold tens of thousands of them, until other people started printing the same thing and put him out of business. But anyway, that's Emma Goldman. Emma, terrific woman. Julian Huxley was born in 1887 on June 22nd. And if the name Huxley is familiar, it should be. He was the brother of novelist Aldous Huxley, the grandson of the agnostic biologist Thomas Henry Huxley. He was trained as a biologist at Oxford. He taught in America and back in the UK. He was an ant specialist, and he became secretary of the Zoological Society of London. I guess we could best, if we have to give him one label, it would be zoologist. But as far as his opinions were concerned, he was a strong secular humanist and called himself, quote, "not merely agnostic, I disbelieve in a personal God in any sense in which that phrase is ordinarily used. I disbelieve in the existence of heaven or hell in any conventional Christian sense." He wrote that in a book called Religion Without Revelation. He was an early evolutionary theorist, and he wrote a bunch of books, including some with very top other free thinkers like J.B.S. Haldane and H.G. Wells. He wrote a 2-volume autobiography in the early 1970s and was knighted. And for the contemporary green movement world, Julian Huxley was the founder of the World Wildlife Fund. And in 1927, he had a nice line. He said, "Operationally, God is beginning to resemble not a ruler, but the last fading smile of a cosmic Cheshire cat." Lovely line. Also this week looked at the lives of, in reverse order, Julian Huxley, Emma Goldman, the anarchist, Ambrose Bierce, the epigrammist, and journalist, Ricky Gervais, the entertainer, and George Orwell, the novelist, and all-around good guy of the 20th century.
Whatever we once were, we are no longer a Christian nation, at least not just. We are also a Jewish nation, a Muslim nation, and a Buddhist nation, and a Hindu nation, and a nation of non-believers.